Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades, I hope you're doing well this today, being Furahi Day or Friday. Whatever you're watching, whether you're watching from Asia, Europe, United States, Kenya, whatever the case you are, whatever the case is, please, karibu sana. My name is Kenya Revolutionary for another session. I won't stay here for long. As usual, I usually say that in a typical African fashion. When I say I don't stay here long, be prepared. But I'm serious. I won't be here for long. But anyway, the first order of business, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades, whether you have subscribed or you haven't subscribed yet, the first order of business is to like the video. Go ahead and like the video. Like the video. Hit that like button. Like the video. Like the video. And once you've liked it, if it's your first time and you're wondering what I usually talk about on this channel, I talk about Kenyan politics and the world politics as it relates to Kenya. So karibu sana. Let's get that out of the way first. Hit that like button. After ukisha hit that like button, if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Karibu sana ani na kuona. Hey, umekuwa huko mstari wa mbele kweli kweli. Na kuona huko mstari wa mbele. Haya, weka like basi. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys, for joining, for all of you guys. And for all of you guys who are going to watch on repeat, please do the same. If you're going to watch on X, unaweza kuvuka huku YouTube. Ama if you can't, just find me on Kenya Revolutionary channel. Like the name suggests there, and kuja or subscribe, right? Sawa basi. All right, let's talk about what's happening in our great country, Kenya. And in the Eastern African region. Mstari wa mbele kabisa. Mstari wa mbele. Ay. Okay, so let's discuss what's happening in our country, Kenya, okay? We see, I've been talking about this for the past 2-3 days since the advent in Ivory Coast. We saw what happened in Ivory Coast, and now as we are kind of getting a clear picture of what happened there with the coup d'etat, Ouattara was toppled from government. I don't know if he was arrested. There's reports that he was actually arrested by the military, okay? And that the military, the Malian general, whoever, the people from Mali, the Malian general Mascari, the Malian military helped the Ivory Coast military to take out Ouattara, okay? I already told you why Ouattara was taken out, why the reasons, and so forth, so forth. We know what's happening, but he was the biggest puppet, Western puppet in that Western African region. But let's move over to Eastern Africa. It seems that in response to what has been happening in West Africa, the West are using what is called the soft coup, okay? The soft coup d'etat, okay? While on the West, coup d'etat is through a military coup d'etat where they're using the military, members of the military. Of course, the West, the United States are not behind it, but the military, African military men are deciding to take over power. I've explained that historically, this whole idea of democracy, Western democracy, trying to bring it to Africa has not worked. Not because Africans are naturally not democratic, but it is because the same Western powers, they meddle in our electoral process through this voter fraud and voter, the voting process is usually compromised, okay? So Africans wakangalia hivyo wakasema, you know what? If we cannot take out power, take power or remove these Western puppets through the ballot, then we're definitely going to use the bullets, okay? As the famous say by Malcolm X, ballots or the bullets. So, like I said, the democracies in Africa that are backed by Western powers, like the case of Ruto or Kenya, okay? Kenya is a perfect example. Since independence, the so-called independence, we've always had the same thing. We go to the ninio, tunaenda tuna vote, lakini your vote really does not count in real sense. So what the West Africans have done, wakasema, if the votes doesn't count, then we shall use the military way to actually take power, okay? And that's what's happening. But now, vile West wameona kwamba West Africans are actually they are wako mstari wa mbele. You mean French intelligence slept on the job in regards to Ivory Coast? Maybe that was the case. I don't know if that was the case or it was just a matter of, the military. Because, even though the French intelligence were working together with Ouattara and all that stuff, it's very hard to counter a military coup d'etat if the members of the military themselves wameamua kwamba hii serikali itoke. So even if you get intelligence through the French, wakikwambia, hey, unajua nini? There might be a possible coup d'etat. Now already these members of the army of the military, already majority of them are not happy with Ouattara, especially since they are looking at their jirani wakina Burkina Faso na Mali na what's the other na Niger. Na wanaona kuwa wale watu are really bringing a huge difference. Okay, wakiona hivyo, they'll feel a certain type of way. Karibu sana Pritika Kaura, I see you. Please go ahead and hit the like button as always. Okay, so it's very hard. So maybe it might be a combination of two. To me, I suspect that the majority of these Western countries majority of the military in Ivory Coast were already fed up with Ouattara and the system. And so when somebody came in there, as we are told now, the Malian military also had a part to play in removing Ouattara. Okay, so I think the environment was conducive enough for a change. People were tired of Ouattara, and since there was a general sense of anti-Western backed puppets, it was an easy thing to do. Okay, so wale majamaa wakakuja, they just assisted. So even the French intelligence would have not helped them. Just for example, let's use Ruto. Ruto might be having intelligence that there's a possible maandamano, whether the Brits are telling him or the Americans are telling him that there's a possibility of another maandamano. Okay, now what can Ruto do to counter that? He can only use distraction like he's using now by arresting Natembeya and kupigana na Gachagua hapa, kuambia Gachagua aanze kumtukana, whatever the case is. But if the people already do not want you and that they're tired of you, even if you receive that intelligence, the only thing you can do is either start running or fight back. But at some point, you can't fight back if the general feeling, majority of your cabinet members, of the military people, the people of Kenya are tired of you. There's nothing much you can do. You just have to flee. That's something that you have to do, okay? But anyway, so what is happening is this, like I was saying, since the West have realized that West African countries, there's a strong anti-Western sentiment, and members of the military are actually taking power through the bullets. Okay, it's not a negotiation. Hatutaki ile mchezo ya tuendeni kwa, let's go to the booth and cast a vote. Hiyo mambo imeisha. In West Africa waliona tumejaribu hiyo for so many years, it's not working because the elections are always rigged. So the best way to do this is to use the military, kutumia kifua, to take back power, and that's what's happening. Okay, now the West wameona this, the West wameona kuwa okay, hii ndio sasa njia ambayo hawa watu wanataka kutumia, so let's counter that and start on the East, because we don't want these people from East Africa to get any ideas. So what are they doing? They're going to use a soft coup. What is a soft coup, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters? Soft coup is when you use propaganda to prop up certain leaders and to demonize the ones that you want to overthrow. It's not a new concept, okay? This is how Shah was brought to remove Mossadegh in 1950s Iran, okay? The same reason. Mossadegh, the president of Iraq in 1950s, decided to nationalize Iranian oil, okay? Iranian oil. and he cut off the British and Americans who had great interest in the Iranian oil. So what did the British and the Americans do? They, through the CIA and other intelligence organizations, they used NGOs who pretended to be doing what? To be advancing democracy and freedom and all these wonderful, colorful words that you might think are noble ideas. Okay, we are promoting democracy in Iran, so we are promoting youth to get involved in politics. Such nonsense like that. But the whole deal was to actually start demonizing Mossadegh, and that's how they caused the popular revolution. And Mossadegh was removed through a coup d'état, Popular People's Revolution. Okay, this is not the first time it has been. It has been used in numerous countries. So what is happening in Kenya is something similar. Not Kenya, just Kenya with Ruto. I'm not talking about Ruto. I want to talk about Tanzania specifically with Suluhu. What you're seeing is going on. I want to zero in on Boniface Mwangi, because this guy is the biggest crisis actor, charlatan, fake political activist of our time. I'll tell you that right now without blinking an eyelid. Okay? Batting an eyelid. Let me tell you something. I just discovered, I was listening to, I saw a quote, I read a quote by Kagame, not my favorite politicians. I do not like Kagame in so many ways, but Kagame said something that was interesting. And he said that Western NGOs are financing, okay? They're financing these so-called political activists to destabilize the East African region. I repeat one more time for the people sitting on the back. The Western NGOs are financing political activism in East Africa to destabilize the region. Now, I read further. I went to different discussions on X, and I saw there was one NGO that has been very active worldwide, especially in Africa. It's called Open Society Foundation, formerly known as Open Society Institution. It's an American NGO that was started by, guess who? George Soros. Anybody rings a bell? George Soros? Anybody knows George Soros? Okay, very familiar. A guy who has been meddling in majority of the countries, not only in Europe, Africa, and even in Latin America. Okay, George Soros is somebody who is known to be involved in a lot of coup d'etats, especially in Ukraine and blah, blah, blah. So if you take a Google, just use Google, type in Kenyan activists that are employed, are involved with Open Society Foundation. You shall see Boniface Mwangi's name shall pop up, among others, who are being paid by this institutional now called foundation. Very active, is part of the Ninio. And when I saw that, I was like, so this is what's happening. That's why I told you, always connect the dots. And I won't repeat it today, but I will repeat it for the sake of clarity. Again, I told you why Suluhu is being targeted. There's an election in Tanzania in November this year. Okay? Suluhu is going to be facing an election this year in November 2025. Okay? So the campaign has started against this lady. You can see right now with all the activists, all the Kenyan activists on X are very busy painting her as this dictator, evil woman who is torturing people and killing people, and the opposition are disappearing, and all sorts manner of stuff that are being associated with Suluhu's name. Now, I'm not here to defend Suluhu as far as her way of running Tanzania. I do not know. I don't live in Tanzania. I don't follow that politics, the Tanzanian politics closely. So I am not qualified to tell you whether or not Suluhu is a dictator. But one thing I will tell you is this, that even if she was a dictator, why is it all of a sudden they are going for her? Why is she being targeted? Why is a name, you know, wakina Martha Karua kirukaruka huku na nani Boniface Mwangi, wakirukaruka hivi wanaenda BBC, and they create all this drama, and all of a sudden they are in BBC, they are on NTV, and they are all in the news everywhere, okay? Trying to make Suluhu look bad. Why? I told you that, again, like I explained to you yesterday, that Tanzania banned US dollars, the use of the US currency in Tanzania. I'll repeat, under Suluhu, under President Suluhu and her administration, they decided to ban the use of the US dollar in Tanzania, following the footsteps of the BRIC nations. And like I said again, every country historically that dumps the US dollar, especially if it's a developing country, prepare for a regime change. Prepare for a regime change, because you are actually weakening the US currency. You're breaking their economic strength, because they depend on that US dollar, because that's how they manipulate and weaken other countries that are pegged on the dollar, weaken their currency. Okay? So like I said, historically speaking, any country that moves away from the US dollar or ban the use of US dollar, they always find themselves in a confrontation with the US, whether militarily or through an indirect coup d'etat. Example, Iran, Russia, China, name it. All these BRIC nations, you see them. You understand what I'm saying? So now connect the dots. And this was done, Tanzania just, wali announced this not so far in kitambo. Just a few months ago, weeks, literally, this decision to ban the US dollar. So now, after Suluhu decided that, you know, like I said yesterday, why is it that it took this long for now, wakina Boniface Mwangi? Now let's review what Boniface Mwangi's movement, behavior in this whole fiasco, this Tanzanian fiasco. It started with Martha Karua. Martha Karua tried to gain entry in Tanzania, and she was denied. And she caught a flight back to Kenya. And again, she made a meal out of it, went to every news media that she could, you know, get to, the Githeri media that propagates everything that this political class always do, and started spewing her nonsense about how Suluhu is a dictator, how they did not want her over there, how she's Unini, okay? Now, that wasn't effective enough, because people thought, you know, okay, Martha Karua, she's kwanga kierere, you know, she's an idler, she likes going to other people's country to, you know, kusumbua watu huko. So no, but it really didn't have an impact. So what they did is to ramp up those tensions by using Boniface Mwangi. Remember, Martha Karua was denied. That's former Chief Justice, what's his name? Not Maraga, the other one. I forgot. The useless one with the ear stud. Okay? I forgot his name. Somebody remind me of the chat. Huyo pia alisimamishwa. But interesting, Martha Karua and that former Chief Justice, who are also on the payroll of these NGOs, Mutunga, thank you very much. Mutunga, thank you, Annie. Mutunga. Martha Karua, Mutunga were both stopped from entering Tanzania. But who was, nani aliwachiliwa ingie? Maraga. Okay? Now, Boniface Mwangi made it to Tanzania. I don't know how, but he made it to Tanzania. He was in a hotel somewhere. They shot a video with Hanifa. Hanifa was standing somewhere where there was obviously there was something called interrogation, which was misspelled, interrogation room that was misspelled. Red flag number 1. But anyway, Hanifa karudi. And then Boniface apparently alibaki huko. And you could see this, the snippet that Boniface, you know, alikuwa hapo the camera was rolling and Boniface was you know, yelling, basically yelling at the officials. Punde si punde, tunasikia Boniface ameshikwa. Punde si punde, Boniface alirudishwa Kenya. Punde si punde, tunasikia, oh, Boniface actually hasn't been deported. He has been detained by Tanzanian authorities and is being held without any kind of mean of communication with anyone. That's what we are. I'm walking you through the series of events, sequence of events. Okay. So after a day or two, or whatever, I think it was a day, when everybody's screaming, oh, free Boniface Mwangi, free Boniface Mwangi. Oh, all of a sudden he reappears in Ukunda or something, whatever the case is, somewhere in the coast. 2 people are holding him and anatembea, and it was a terrible acting job. Terrible acting job. I could tell this is fake. And from the pictures, I was trying to see if there's any kind of injuries in his legs, knees, toes, head, eyes, ears. I saw no signs of injury. It was a poor acting job. Look at that clip when alikuwa anasaidiwa na watu wawili to get into the car. Anajifanya haizi kutembea. Then they finally let him get into the car. Alafu he doesn't need help. Sasa zile anaenda kuingia kwa gari wanakata ndio, they put off the camera because it will have showed how fake that stuff is. I told you, pay attention to what the behavior by Boniface Mwangi and what he will say. Okay, you could see and look at his body. Vile alikuwa amevaa hiyo kinyasa. Look at his legs, look at his face, look at his head. If there's any signs kama mtu amepigwa ama whatever, you can tell if somebody has been tortured, because that's the claim, that he was tortured, but you couldn't see. Then today actually, or yesterday, whatever the case is, a few hours ago, he wrote the experience that he had while he was detained. And again, there was some inconsistencies in his story, because I read the excerpt. Yeah, nikamchezo. Then I read the excerpt that he wrote on his in his X, and he was saying that that lady, I think, what's her name, Agatha or something, Agatha, they were blindfolded and handcuffed. I'll repeat, blindfolded and handcuffed. So alikuwa haezi kuona kitu na amekuwa handcuffed, amepigwa pingu. Then he claims that they were stripped naked. Na wakaambiwa waende wakaoge. And by the way, while they're stripped naked and they were handcuffed and blindfolded means you can't see, right? So ukikuwa blindfolded wamekufunga macho, ama kizungu mimi ndio sielewi. Kama wamekufunga macho na umekwa pingu, you can't see and you can't quite grab anything. Boniface goes ahead and told us that while he was blindfolded and handcuffed, there were 3 lawyers. And out of these 3 lawyers, there was one that was of average height. So I started asking myself, okay, if you're blindfolded, you're stripped naked, and you are handcuffed, how did you see and how did you know that this person is of an average height and is a lawyer? Inquiring minds will ask these kind of questions. If you are blindfolded and handcuffed and stripped naked, how did you know that this man, was it before the blindfolding? And how did you? So that's why I'm saying, if you listen to the stories these guys tell, they do not make sense. Oh, and that's what I'm telling you. Listen to what they say. So he comes back. He's been found in Ukunda and he needs medical attention, of course. Listen to me. For anyone who's listening, who is in Kenya or who anywhere, if Bonnie gives a press conference or goes and gives an interview. Follow up. Ask him, what hospital did you go to? And what kind of injuries did you suffer? Because he was saying his knee, sijui imefanyika nini, sijui nini. Let us know. We want to know. We want to get the report, the doctor that actually examined your body and determined the extent of injury that you sustained after the torture. Follow up. That is called true journalism. Usiende hapo kuanza kumuuliza ati what color is Suluhu's eyes or your abductor's eyes or captor's eyes. Ask real questions. That's the same. Yes, I let a medical report ya ukweli. Just like Morara was trying to pull a fast one on us when he went to Spice FM and he was asked, what kind of injuries did you suffer? Vile ulitupiwa hizo kiti unasema ati those kiti zilikuwa kiti za chuma. And he started saying, God is my sustainer. God will sustain me. God, tunakuuliza, uliumia wapi? Wacha kutuambia ati God is your sustainer. God sustains everything on earth. Tuambie uliumia wapi? Wacha kutuambia mambo kama hivyo. So the same questions, we should prod. Ask him those tough questions. What happened, step by step? Now, today I've heard the other lady also has been released somewhere in Uganda. And someone posted, I don't know if it's true, but somebody posted and Anifa retweeted it, that walimnajisi. Okay, she was sexually assaulted. I don't know if that's true. If it's true, that's unfortunate, but I would like to also follow up on that. Where's the medical report? We want to see the rape kit. Does it actually suggest that tu jamaa kwa alifanywa hivi? You understand what I'm saying? Because these guys are playing a very dangerous game on behalf of this George Soros Open Society Foundation. It's a dangerous game that they're playing. The whole idea is to create this narrative that Suluhu is a brutal dictator who will brutalize anyone that opposes her regime. That is what they're trying to drive. That's why they want to sensationalize everything that happened, starting with Martha Karua and Boniface Mwangi. Now, here's the question that I want us to ask ourselves. Another question that I want you to ask yourselves. Why did Tanzanians, the Tanzanian authorities, listen to this. Why did the Tanzanian authorities let Maraga in? Walimwacha Maraga aingie, but they stopped Martha Karua, deported Boniface Mwangi, stopped Mutunga. Why did the Tanzanian authorities stop Martha Karua, former Justice Mutunga, and deported Boniface Mwangi? Why? But they let Maraga aende akaone Tundu Lissu. Why was that? Why was that done? I want you to think about that. Somebody tell me on the chat. Why did they do that? Kwa nini Maraga aliwachiliwa aingie, lakini Martha Karua asiingie, na Boniface Mwangi akadipotiwa, na Mutunga alikuwa dinio, alistopishwa? Why? This is why, but I'll come back to that. I'll answer it in this way. Because there's an argument that some people are making here. I see some people who are making this argument that, oh, you know, we are part of Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki, Magharibi, whatever the case is, East African, whatever. Okay? There are people who are making that case. That on that EAC treaty, they'll tell you the clause that says that since we are in a treaty as East Africans, and there's even East African passports, which means if you're a holder of that Eastern African passport, you can travel freely to Tanzania and Uganda and Kenya. May I remind you this, for those of you who are making, they had a bag and had everything. Is that true, Nani? Who had a bag? Ebu niambie, ebu eleza ani hapo, nieleze. So here's what I'm saying. Here's what I'm saying. For those of you who are making the argument that, oh, Martha Karua and Mutunga shouldn't have been stopped because they are members of East African community. We have a treaty with Tanzania. They are member of EAC and they signed the treaty. Okay? out of their own volition, voluntarily. So Martha Karua had the right to get into Tanzania and, go see Tindulusu and whatever stuff. I beg to differ. Listen to me very carefully. I want you to listen carefully. The treaty that Tanzanians entered with Kenya and Uganda, the East African treaty that makes this Jumuiya nonsense, does not give Kenyans a right to enter into Tanzania. Even if you hold an Eastern African passport, it's not your right to get into Tanzania. It's a privilege that you enjoy as a member of the Eastern African community. I'll explain to you. Just because Kenya has a treaty with Tanzania and Uganda as part of the Eastern African bloc, and you can hold an East African passport, that passport does not give you a right to travel to Tanzania whenever you like. That passport is a privilege, gives you privilege to travel to Tanzania and Uganda freely. Now, if you know something, privilege can be taken away from you. Privilege is not a right. A right is God-given. A privilege is like a permission. If somebody takes your life, they've violated your right to life, because life is given to you by God. You understand? You have a right to some things, but there's some things a privilege. Okay? Traveling to Tanzania, whether you are a member of the Eastern African community and you have a passport, is not a right, it's a privilege. So when Martha Karua goes to Tanzania and they stop her at the border and tell her, Martha Karua, you cannot get into Tanzania, Tanzanians have a right, because that is their God-given land. They stayed there. That's a republic on itself. They reserve that right to stop you from enjoying the privilege as a Kenyan or a member of Eastern African community from accessing their boundaries. Because when they signed the treaty, they did not give up their sovereignty to what we call the East African community. They never gave their sovereignty. They simply had a treaty, an agreement that now the members of this Eastern Bloc, of these three republics, can travel. They can have a privilege of traveling within these three countries that have this treaty. But it's a privilege. It's not a right. Anyway, let me read what Annie was saying here. Annie was saying this. Tanzania seems to be acting based on information at hand. Absolutely. That's where I was coming to. Thank you so much. So now I'm coming to this. Again, number two. Now that I've told you that Tanzania reserves the right to limit your privileges as a member of the Eastern Bloc, Eastern African Bloc, from accessing or entering into their country, okay? They can limit your privileges. Privileges can be taken away. Rights cannot, okay? Unless your rights can only be taken away if you violate somebody else's right. For example, if you take somebody's life, you've umewadhulumu rights zao, their natural God-given rights to life. So your life can also be taken. Unaelewa? Babu Owino, I heard you are a lawyer now. Ingia hapa tugombane. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is this, now to come to Annie's point here, because this is a very, very important, important news. Nataka muelewe. Don't be carried as fools. Wale watu wanarukaruka hapa wanasema, hey, Martha Karua should enter into Kenya. Oh, sijui nani, Boniface Mwangi. No. Listen to me very carefully. Listen to me very carefully. On the surface level, these governmental officials, Suluhu and the government administration, they do have some information about some people. Okay? Thank you very much, Annie. You're very grounded, absolutely. These people, they're not like me and you. They have a system of intelligentsia. Unasikia? They gather information. Ni kama tu hata sasa wewe kama unataka kwenda Amerikani. Ukitaka kuingia Amerikani, that's why they ask for fingerprints nowadays. Unaenda unaweka kidole hapo, and they look at their data. They try to find out, huyu jamaa anasema ametoka Kenya. What's his history? What's his business? Is he involved in politics? What kind of politics is he involved in? What kind of political affiliations or organization is he part of? Ni mtu ambaye ataingia hapa atuvuruge maneno ama ni mtu aina gani? You see what I'm saying? So being a government, they must have known, have information about Boniface's involvement with Open Society Foundation that he is part of, that is being financed by George Soros. You don't have to be the member of the CIA or FBI to know who George Soros is and what he does. He's a globalist known to be involved in a lot of coups d'etats, popular revolutions in different countries, including Ukraine and Africa too. Okay? So what I'm trying to say is this, to come to Annie's point here, which is a very good one. Yes. Thank you so much, Annie. So what I'm trying to say is this. The Tanzanian authorities, given the intelligence they had or have about Boniface Mwangi, Willy Mutunga, and Martha Karua, and everyone that was deported and denied entry into Tanzania, they deemed that fit to deny them entry into Tanzania. And they do have a right to exercise that discretion because it is their country, it is their laws. So they get to decide if they think, given Mutunga, Martha Karua, and Boniface Mwangi's political activities, involvements in other countries and even in their own country, given the fact that they are being paid by Western NGOs who historically have been known to destabilize nations and cause regime change, the Tanzanian authority came and made a decision not to allow Willy Mutunga, Martha Karua, and Boniface Mwangi from entering into their country. That's why, on this very issue, I stand with Suluhu when she said that we cannot let people to come to a country and cause chaos. Yes. Amakombe talked about Soros kitambo sana. Thank you. Yes. Soros ni shetani, ibilisi. Since Gachagua talked about being bugged, leave nothing to chance. Wataweka hadi kwa choo. Yeah. I think I'm also bugged too. I'm telling you. Yeah. Absolutely. That is why when I hear people talk about sijui We are members of East African country, EAC. We have a treaty with Tanzania. Wasitucheze, we can go anywhere and we can be activists. No, 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 no. Even though we have a treaty in place, na tuko na hiyo the idea of jumuiya, where we can cooperate, okay, we can enjoy freedoms, privileges, certain privileges due to this treaty that we have. That does not stop Tanzania from exercising their sovereign duties of controlling and protecting their borders. Even if you're a member of the EAC, but you're deemed to be a troublemaker, someone who will go to Tanzania to cause trouble, Tanzanians have the right to tell you, La hasha, you cannot enter into our country and be involved politically or destabilize the country by kuingia na kuchochea watu hapa, kuchochea Suluhu. You understand what I'm saying? That is the point that I am making. So for you, people who go around, those of you who go around and say, oh, we are a member of EACC, no, 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 she can be stopped. Suluhu is 100% right on this. And I stand with her on that issue. Absolutely, unapologetically. Okay? That is not up for a debate. So while we want to play these silly games on X, again, look at the people who are actually typing these things, the hashtags. It's the same very people that are working hard. Why? Because there's an election in November 2025. The Tanzanian elections are coming in November 2025, and they are hoping to demonize Suluhu so badly, so that when election ikifika, they'll even try to rig her out. They're even arguing that Suluhu was never voted in. It was Pombe Magufuli. She was just the vice president. These are the kind of silly arguments they're making to try to demonize Suluhu. Okay? Again, I'm not going to argue about how Suluhu runs her affairs in Tanzania. I'm not qualified to do so. I do not know much about Tanzania politics. I'm just saying, as it relates to this Boniface Mwangi issue, I told you yesterday, if you look at these people like Boniface Mwangi, who is known to be a clout chaser, a crisis actor, a faker, a Western puppet, part of the NGOs, payee, okay? He's in their payroll. And he works hard to create a narrative. Just given his history and character of commercial activism, crisis acting, I would take Suluhu's word over Boniface Mwangi. That's why I'm very skeptical. In fact, I do not believe a word from Boniface Mwangi when he says that they were tortured and they were done this, and I do not believe it. It's fake. And anyone, I dare anyone who thinks Boniface Mwangi was tortured to challenge me on that. We can debate. I will open the room and I'll put the link. Tell me, give me hard evidence, verifiable evidence, medical reports, scars, video evidence if you have any proof that this man was detained and tortured. I dare anybody to challenge me here. Prove me wrong. Because the whole idea of Boniface Mwangi and Agape, while they're trying to sensationalize all this nonsense, is to try to make Suluhu look bad. And the reason being is Suluhu decided to dump the dollar. So George Soros and his Open Society Foundation, which pays Martha Karua, which pays Boniface Mwangi, which pays Willie Mutunga, wants to demonize her so that by the time they get to the polls in November 2025, they will vote her out and put someone who will play ball with the globalists. That is the whole point. All of a sudden, this lady was found a day after Boniface Mwangi showed up on Ukunda. And we are told ati alifanywa sijui nini walimnajisi. Let's approve that. I want to see the medical reports, the evidence. Where were they? What happened? Tell us the story. Let's compare the two stories if they are corroborating. Because we can't let these Western puppets, paid interest, special interest group, destabilize democracies. Now, we can argue that, oh, tukuna dictatorship in Tanzania, or we have dictatorship in Uganda, or we have dictatorship in Kasongo. Fine, that's a legit argument. The reason why Kenyans want to remove Kasongo is because Kasongo is a Western puppet. And that's not even enough. If he was producing and serving the people, then we would have been, okay, he can be the president because he's actually anatumikia wananchi. But this guy is selling, there's corruption, there's lawlessness, he doesn't care about the constitution. Okay? That's why people want Kasongo out. And Kenyans are going to deal with him pretty soon. That is why. Democracy is different things to different people. You do not expect Jeffersonian democracy in Tanzania. That's my point. I saw a clip of members of the European Union lecture Ugandans on Museveni's tweets. I was appalled. That's an equivalent of, can you imagine if the European Union or ambassador or members of European diplomats, they go to Washington and complain to the state White House and say, we don't like what Donald Trump's son is tweeting on X. Can you imagine how that will turn out? How can you complain about the president's son tweets as a foreigner? You understand what I'm saying? The audacity of the European Union. That's what I'm saying. I saw that and I said, it just gave me a glimpse of how arrogant, the hubris these Europeans have. But anyway, the point, as I mentioned, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends and comrades, is that we have to be wary of this fake activists. Like Kagame said, and I say this, I am not a fan of Kagame by any stretch of imagination. I do not like Kagame. Okay, he has done stuff, good stuff for Rwanda as far as, the infrastructure and all this stuff, but we know the history of Kagame, okay? But regardless of what the man said, they did, I think there's some truth in what he said. When he mentioned that there's a soft coup that is being orchestrated to destabilize the Eastern African bloc of the African region. And like I say, that is most likely a response by the West, since they've witnessed the military coup d'etats that are happening in the West Africa. So now they're responding. And guess the words, their favorite words that they use: democracy, freedom, human rights. Okay? It's always dressed up as a noble, reasonable cause. Oh, democracy. People are speaking up against this despot called Suluhu. All people are complaining about the human rights violation by Suluhu. Oh, people are complaining about their individual liberties that have been breached by the Suluhu administration. Oh, Suluhu is a mean mama. Oh, Suluhu is murdering people all of a sudden. How long has Suluhu been in power? Why now? Because he declared that they're not going to use the US dollar as their currency of trade, means of exchange. They've banned it. You're going for Museveni now after how many years? 40-something years? Now you're going for Museveni because there's 12 trillion US dollar worth of gold deposit in Uganda. Oh, Martha Karua, how busy you've become. Now you're with Bobby Wine, a Western stooge. The liberation of Africa must happen from its root cause. And any collaborator that's in collaborating with the West must be brought to account. The war that is in East Africa is an information war. Because this is a soft coup d'etat, as they labeled it. They want to rile up the population against Suluhu. I'm not going to defend Suluhu's administration. If the Tanzanians, by and large, do not like her, then let them vote her out in a fair election. Let them do that. That's a Tanzanian problem. With Kasongo, I think the verdict is out already. We want him out. But what bothers me is when we have colonial puppets masquerading as human rights activists. The Willie Mutonga, the Martha Karua, the Boniface Mwangi, and all these clowns that are enjoying fat checks that comes from George Soros, while they destabilize the region and cause unnecessary conflict, diplomatic tension, and even deaths. Isn't it a coincidence that Martha Karua was part and parcel of the people who actually drove the tension that resulted into 2007? So this woman has shown that she doesn't mind bloodshed. She doesn't mind if people die as long as she gets her check from George Soros. Same thing with this clown called Boniface Mwangi and the rest of them. Hanifa. Hanifa is a cartoon, an imbecile, an illiterate who thinks she's a celebrity because of the Gen Z movement. I had Caswell, another clown, today say that, oh, Rigathi Gachagua is inciting Kenyans so that we can have another 2007 like chaos that happened. I mean, the level of dishonesty among these people is appalling. I heard what Gachagua said in that interview. Gachagua just said, he simply said this. He did not incite anyone. And I'm not a Gachagua fan, but I will defend him on this. Gachagua simply said that the people at the IEBC should do their patriotic duty and not try to rig the election for Ruto or anybody else, because that will make the country go back to 2007, and it will make it worse than 2007. That's basically what Gachagua said. But now, people like Kasmuel are trying to make it seem like Gachagua was saying that 2027 will be more chaotic than 2027 will be more chaotic than 2007. That's not what Gachagua said. They're misquoting him, and they're misleading the masses. Again, like I said, I'm not a fan of Gachagua, but it is wrong to misquote someone just because you want to earn some brownie points and incite the public. He never said that. He never said that 2027 watu wapigane. That's not what Gachagua said. In all fairness, we have to be fair. Okay? But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, friends, enemies, and comrades, a lot has been happening and a lot is still unveiling. Let's wait and see. I'm waiting to see Boniface Mwangi's interview. I want to hear more about his lies about the detainment and the torture and all the nonsense that they're making up, that the George Soros are telling him to say. I want to hear more of that nonsense. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to watch this on repeat, please like, share, comment, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Okay? And I will see you guys next time I come in. Ama namna gani? Thank you, Annie. Thank you, Pritpal Kaur, and everybody else who's going to watch this on repeat. Peace and blessings.